Exercise foresight, poor eyesight, couldn't fist fight, had to overcompensate. Learn to be clairvoyant, see around corners, read signals and warnings, interpret omens, respond accordingly.
Broadcast from later, we gather and share and discuss and rate the relevance of weak signals of change, aka we look at stuff that we notice and we think might represent significant future shifts. I'm Robert Bolton. I'm joined today by Valdez Sillins, Jeremy Glenn, our producer, Erica White, and Greg Smith, who's a writer, a researcher, a teacher, and a cultural worker. Hi, Greg.
Hi.
Thanks for coming. Welcome.
Yeah, nice to join you.
Valdez, what's your weakest signal?
Yeah, mine's a bit of a strange one. I kind of cobbled it together from different observations, and I'm not sure what it means entirely. So it's kind of like, it actually started with LinkedIn bait earlier, like this week, which was that somebody had posted that a student, like a third-year university student in India, had put together a TensorFlow library for American Sign Language to automatically translate the different gestures and things like that into what I guess the word was underneath it. And I just thought it was curious. And then I looked in a little more, and people had been there's a few packages or libraries out there that do similar stuff, but nobody's really put the whole thing together to automate it in some way. And so there's two ways I can picture the signal or this space of stuff going. On the one hand, I got curious as to why sign language had been taking off so much in it's actually the last decade. It's not just the last few years. So in 2013, sign language was already more popular than German in universities, which surprised me because I was if you want to do any European history or philosophy, German is you need to learn it. And now it's the third most popular language after French and Spanish in the States, at least. So it's booming hugely. The pandemic apparently contributed quite a bit to visibility of it in a lot of ways. So on TikTok, there's been a number of famous challenges. It started with Cardi B's WAP. Somebody was trying to sign to it. And because of because of something about the structure of the lyrics makes it very strange for sign to deal with. Because sign, apparently what you do is you have to put the object first in the sentence. So you signify what you're going to be talking about, and then you animate that object through, if you say you like a book, you have to put the book first, and then you add the gestures to say that you like it or whatever. And when there's multiple characters, you have to sort of a stage manager, you put them all out ahead of time. So you kind of bring them onto the stage, and then you, I guess, animate the different relationships between them. So anyway, so there's the boom of that, why, I'm curious, why signing has a momentum to it. And then on the other hand, speculatively, I was oh, it's interesting, this idea of a machine learning program that does a kind of hand gesture interface. Because I remember years ago, gestural interfaces, everyone was talking about them, but they never kind of went anywhere, it seems to me. And then voice became the big thing that everybody was into. But I also think voice kind of seems a bit of a dead end. The studies on Amazon show that the only thing people use voice for is really simple stuff, play music or what's the weather. No one uses it. It just isn't useful for other kinds of interactions. And so I kind of got curious around what it would mean to purely speculatively, but how would that change our relationship to computing, to be signing with computers? Because there's times when that would make sense. The creepy thing, I guess, about audio is that you're always audible, but with signing, it's only when you want to be visible that you would interact. So there's kind of a different set of ways you could interact with computers. So I kind of got curious as to whether computing maybe is the thing that's changing our relationship to signs and language in some way, and accelerated by COVID. But it's very open-ended. So I've talked for a long time. That's my spiel.
Quarter related. I remember there was really a moment about 4 or 5 years ago when ASL interpreters at concerts, you'd see video of that going viral. And I think it was half about, yay, accessibility and equity, but then also, yay, look at the weird juxtaposition of the ASL interpreter with a rapper or whatever, because then the gesture would kind of mimic what the performer was doing. And I just really remember that being kind of a moment.
In the Super Bowl or something, or no, or was it somebody's speech? But apparently Biden now has it officially for everyone, every speech.
Yeah. And I guess lots of people would say about time. But yeah, the computing angle is interesting because I know that it's prohibitively expensive. It's expensive from a accessibility side to hire somebody to do SAL. But I guess if somebody is doing it and you can auto translate, that just kind of lowers the barrier of access for folks on the other side, like kind of looking in or wanting to see it. Can't do the other way yet. Although I guess we could have an avatar, doing like disembodied hands.
Yeah, that's funny.
When you do have the signers at like concerts and shows, it embodies a different essence of the performance. So it's emotive in a way that, even though the performance is quite emotive, that these videos and the way they got viral is that it's emotive in a different way, and it expresses the performance in a whole other fashion. It's beautiful and really, really fun.
Apparently, because there's like a whole discussion around like the limits of like closed captions for the deaf community because of that challenge of like, actually, it's not just the blank words that are missing, it's like the way they're animated and like the relationship of it to like music and other sounds that are going on. And that's missing when all you have is just the words. Whereas when you're signing, you can actually convey a lot more of that background information around like, how intense is this word? Like, what is it? How is it related to this other one or something like that? So there's the poetics of it.
My exercise routine, a lot of the time I row as an excuse to watch movies, but I often put closed captioning on while I do that because I try not to have the volume too loud. So I'm like kind of, I can't say I'm a closed captioning aficionado, but I will say there are styles. And that like, I don't know, that was that like show on Netflix, Dark, with the really wonky, loopy time travel plot. Like whoever does the captioning for that is really into the sound. So it's like ominous crash, like dark rattle. Like this, the sound is always like narrated in this really expressive way. And so is the music. And other shows, there's like kind of like it's like a different editorial approach, and they don't really touch on the sound. You know what I mean? It's just like the speech or description of background noises. I guess lots of people could have no experience with, and I don't know, it's just a weird range of expression.
You said there's like a library that was being built out with TensorFlow. So I was just curious to know if you know how universalized the use of American Sign Language is.
I think it's always been used among deaf people, or however long language has been around, but it was never formalized as a thing until like the 1760s, like in France. So it's kind of an Enlightenment moment when this doctor decided, he didn't create it, all he did was formalize it. So he just kind of like hammered down like what the meanings of different things were and how the syntax should be structured and all that stuff. Then America, it kind of got imported to America, that version. And there was apparently this golden age of signing that was sort of in the early mid 1800s that then with the advent of the telephone disappeared. And apparently Bell specifically was a huge anti-signer and he was deeply against it. Not because of some conspiracy to sell more telephones, just like something in the water or whatever. They were against signing. So then it kind of disappeared. But it's not universal. It's quite new, I think. I think a lot of people use ASL, but there are dialects. So there is actually something called Black ASL, BASL. And apparently it's like you sign at your chest, but with Black ASL, you sign on your forehead. And then you also use two hands instead of one. So it's like a totally different version of it, which is kind of cool. But I don't know much more other than that.
I wonder if there's something to the technology thing, though, with the phone and everything, because the thing I first wondered was whether there is something intrinsic to like TikTok and signing, and that being why it would happen because of the sort of, you're in this vertical screen. Even the way dancing has changed because of TikTok. There's all these gestures that are happening with your hands. I even think of like, tutting, that dance style that's become like, it kind of works very well for vertical video. And I wonder if like signing, part of it is just like, okay, we're communicating via video, and this is what makes a lot of sense now. I don't know.
I also thought that it might be to navigate, exactly when you said that they were collecting like libraries of ASL, that it might be to enforce more like interaction design, that not enforce, but to build out interaction design, like how you would end up navigating any kind of device, like using your hands. So you see a lot of those like gloves and like the recognition of the hand. You see a lot of those floating around the internet. And I'm wondering if it's to build out interaction design.
Yeah, that was the part I was speculating on, I think, where I was like, oh, I wonder if you could use like different new kinds of signing for people who are not like hard of hearing or not deaf, that are based on like a different kind of way of interacting with these like computer vision models and things like that. I also wonder, I got curious about, so the alternative to signing is lip reading, which was like what Bell pushed a lot. But I was like, oh, I wonder if there's any, like how good computer vision is at lip reading, if there's other information that's going on in lip reading other than like the obvious visual stuff. I have no clue. I don't really know how it works.
I think it was during the 2019 Hong Kong protests, 2019, 2020, where a bunch of material came out where protesters had like collected different signs to communicate with each other during the protest. So those were technically new types of gestures and sign languages that were created just in that moment of trying to communicate with each other during the protest, which is another really strange place to think where like this growing new kind of sign language would emerge from, just as a way to do it quickly and perhaps across a large group of people, whether it was in times of like dire need where they're seeking medical help in the moment, or if it was just to relay some sort of small communicative thing across the group.
Occupy had all its gestures. It had the gloriously inefficient human microphone, though, where it would take like a freaking 2 minutes for a message to travel back through a crowd, but it had all the other gestures like approval, disapprove.
Are there examples of signing that kind of convey something that vocal language do not? Like, is there any examples that anyone's aware of? Where I'm just thinking because like sign language, especially for a technology like the internet, like seems ideally positioned to kind of stand in for a lot of things that may not be able to be conveyed. Like we're trying to do things through like emojis or other like tactics to kind of get communication through. But like we've talked about on other episodes, digitizing languages and how much of a problem it is, especially for like character-based languages. And it seems like something like gestural could either be like an add-on to an existing language set, or it could just like, I don't know, because I don't know it, like what it's capable of conveying beyond like what regular languages might be doing.
Yeah, I'm not an expert in it by any means, but apparently there's been some there's limits on how it gets translated across things like Zoom. I didn't really understand why, but there's internal discussions around how it's not quite the same as signing in person for some reason. But in general, one thing I read was just that the same way that a picture conveys 1,000 words, they were honestly a sign conveys 10,000. It's you can actually with a single gesture do what would take 3 sentences to do in a spoken language. And so there is a kind of compression in certain ways of certain kinds of information that is pretty interesting. It kind of feels like you're dancing with these signs or something in a way that seems kind of interesting to me.
So if this many people are learning, is it developing? Is that also generative? Are more people using it, and therefore is the language growing and changing faster than it has in the past? If it's having another boom or sort of golden age right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'd be very curious to know too. I mean, all languages are always changing and developing, so it must be.
And on the why now front, I know a lot of people picked up musical instruments during the pandemic, so why not a language too? It's you'd have the woodshed time to just throw yourself into something that just takes time.
I don't know much about TensorFlow libraries. It seems like with something like that, you could potentially be developing the language through the machine learning. They could actually be finding ways to create a new, not a new language, but a derivation of that language, almost like a dialectic sign language or something like that.
Something like that seems to make sense to me, that it could generate more new signs or new configurations of signs. Yeah.
Because you're building the data set in order to translate. So that's the training to I want halfway between these 2 words. They each have a gesture. What's the new gesture? I don't know. If there's not a word for it, there's a problem, but it's a gesture you can make.
It's funny because there's some novelty apps for generating words or names and things like that, obviously in text, but you don't really hear that many. Yeah, it's an interesting problem, generating new words and things like that.
Think of the resolution of sign language and the number of joints in the hands, and I guess the arms are involved in too. I wonder if between the number of syllables or phonemes versus the number of possible gestures, I wonder which one has more possible things, which has a possibly bigger lexicon, if that's the right word. I bet it's not spoken language, and not English anyways. How about German versus sign language? Germans have words for everything. So
a GAN that looks at the latent space between different signs did seem really interesting. And latent space is the space between 2 discrete possibilities. How do you get from one sign like a fist to like an open palm, there's like this latent space between it that morphing could be very weird and interesting.
Yeah, also
Super cool.
positionally with the BASL example, if you're only limited to this range of space, like there's so many other alternatives, that would open up for like gestural, now you're including parts of the arm maybe, and you're like, I can think of some gestures that include like other body
shoulders,
parts
shoulder alignment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So with this signal about this, I mean, I'm still really interested in the why, but if we aren't getting to the bottom of like why it's happening, what do we think it could mean? Like what could be the consequences of so much growth and learning?
I was actually hoping Udit would be here because I wanted to bring up the word cell versus shape rotator meme that passed, which will probably be very like old news by the time this thing comes out. But I had been like irritated by that meme, I think, and probably like I was the target to be like irritated
it was working
by it. Yeah, it worked. But I was like, this is such a bad dichotomy. Like, first of all, like all the best like shape rotators, which means like people who are good at math, were like people who were good at words, like Leibniz, Descartes, like people who are at the core of like inventing modern mathematics were like brilliant philosophers. There's no opposition between them. And then I wondered if like this sign thing, because apparently one of the things that it does do is that it kind of changes your spatial abilities, your ability to literally shape rotate. This destroys that dichotomy of shape rotator word cell, because you're literally word rotating. And at a higher level, that just made me wonder, is it a signal of some kind of like new relationships to the body and expressivity that are like have the potential to emerge, and not this kind of farcical vision of like word cells that shape rotators have, which are just like ridiculous. Like words rotate, man. It's like they're embodied, they move, and same with numbers. Like they're part of this world. Philosophical signal.
So signal and noise, Jeremy?
I definitely think like as a new language for communication online, and not as a new language, but as something to add on to and help with communication online. And also this idea of the sort of latent space idea, or like something derived from sign language that we yet do not have words for, or gestures.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, it's interesting as this idea that it might be some sort of addition to our UI grammar, mix of ways that we input. Greg, what do you think? Signal or noise?
Signal. And I liked the TikTok turn, putting it alongside dance and affect there works for me. Why not? We had our short form writing because of Twitter, but what if speechless social media posts that aren't just dance? I know we have lots of dance, but put it beside that. I'm there for that. That's exciting.
Erica, signal or noise?
I'd say signal. I'd echo a lot of the stuff that mentioned in terms of its growth, but also just where it could be super useful as well with creating new languages to communicate online. But then I see it being a place where probably youth development would also really benefit in terms of just the pressure for like children, mostly in their development, to learn how to speak a verbal language. There's a lot of emphasis on that. And I think having more of a emphasis on something more gestural could be really beneficial to their development. So
unanimous signal. I agree. It's a signal. I also like that thing that Valdez got to at the very beginning, that it's like this, as far as ways that we might sort of dissolve the interface, it's the between us and our devices and whatever's on the other side of them, like the quietness of it being like this, where you don't have to, not everyone has to know the business that's between you and your computer if they're not looking at you or whatever. There's something kind of interesting about that.
You can't whisper and sign. That's the challenge.
That's
so when
the
you're sharing
thing.
secrets,
In some way, everything is loud. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
You could have loud bodily expression, though.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you might be able to whisper, kind of, and compact. Greg, what's your weakest signal?
So this is kind of basic, but it's also kind of like deals with like pipes and infrastructure. But I saw a video a few days ago that was making the rounds on crypto Twitter of Solana Pay. So the backstory to this is Solana is one of 4 or 5 upstarts that are kind of after Ethereum. It costs like fractions of a cent to do a transaction, not $60. It's fast. There's about 5 would-be pretenders to the throne that are after Ethereum's kind of spot as the smart contract king cryptocurrency. So anyways, it was just this banal video of it being used by a US congressman. Basically, there's a wallet called Phantom, which is kind of like to Solana what MetaMask is to Ethereum. And it just has really nice UI and it's really good. And it just released its iOS version, big deal. But that just opens up a lot of people being able to access that particular cryptocurrency on, the iOS devices, which is a big share of the market. And then simultaneous to that rolling out, the Solana Foundation announced a deal with Circle, which is the company in the States that makes UCSD, which is one of the big American US dollar stablecoins. And simultaneous to that, with the wallet, with this deal, they have a Solana Pay, which is basically like your point of sale, what was formerly Square and now Block. Like that type of interface, they kind of day one had something like that ready. So I saw this video, it's just of a congressman buying coffee at a cafe and the transaction happens in 3 seconds total. QR code comes up, he points at it with his phone and then it pays in Solana and it's done. Boring, who cares? It's just at a cafe. But they're fucking coming for American Express and Visa. And I don't know if you've ever worked in a restaurant or anything, but everybody hates American Express because it's 3.5% charge. But the Solana transaction, because there's certainly companies there, but there's not like a multinational company there. There's just a blockchain that's pretty fast now. So I'm just wondering how much pickup this is going to have because the margins will be really nominal, rather than $3 on 100, it's going to be 3 cents on $100. And I just wonder, I don't know, when I see things like that coming from the crypto space, everybody's talking about how sexy DAOs are, or I don't know, NFTs, or, you mentioned the metaverse, but then at the other end in the spectrum, it's almost like the boring stuff. I want to see, and I'm excited to see kind of they're coming for, American Express. And then I just wonder, how long for whether it's JP Morgan or Citibank is next in the crosshairs, where the margins that those companies operated on are just no longer going to be feasible because they're replaced by something that's an order of a magnitude cheaper and decentralized. So I don't know if excitement was the right word for that, but I had a real wow, it's so banal, but it's something that anybody could do. And that's the problem with so many things in crypto, is that you just need to install this and do this and then KYC and da. And just the idea, of frictionless point of sale transaction. I wonder what the capacity of that could be. So we'll see. I remember when Square rolled out, I was surprised by how quickly it got picked up at little stores and cafes. It's not that there was a learning curve because they had good UI, but I think they had margins similar to the older companies. It was just better UI. What happens when the pipes aren't inserting themselves as a middle person, I guess is what I'm wondering about. And that's kind of my question for everything right now. But that was just a very everyday transaction that I could just see, I don't know, really seeing pickup. So I'm already saying that I think this is a signal. I just don't know how strong of a signal it is.
I'm so curious to learn more about this video of this US congressman. So what is the origin of it? What's the vibe of it? Why is he being filmed?
It's just like any other, every blockchain has its boosters. So it's politicians,
propaganda.
Yes. Okay. And sermonizing and proselytizing. But Vitalik Buterin was just doing photo ops with the governor of Denver. Denver is going to be the first digital space. So this is something to file next to that. And politicians are falling over themselves right now. Either you got your Elizabeth Warrens on the one hand, who are taking big swings at the industry and maybe pushing for regulation, which isn't unwarranted. And then you have all the people the pro-business, anti-regulation, Miami mayors, New York mayors, various congressmen who are just kind of falling over themselves to get in bed. So it was just some congressman, I don't know what state it was in, but it was filmed, by some Solana boosters. It's just an example. Look how easy it was. And it was captioned first politician to use Solana Pay. Yes, That's for the Guinness books for sure.
Right.
But now that, it's not of any particular provenance, and it was definitely some propaganda, that got picked up by people that were wanted to see that, or want to see that particular blockchain succeed.
Right. Got it.
The days of having to send your money in like a paper envelope to some stranger in the US to trade for coin or whatever that
Sure.
somebody
Yeah.
on this call did a few months ago
Yeah.
to get
Yeah.
access
Like
to.
2000s eCash or whatever. And there was like there was like a Liberty coin too. And yeah, we've come a long way since then.
Even stuff for like MetaMask, like it was apparently quite
Oh,
challenging. It wasn't as easy as just linking your bank account or whatever.
yeah.
It was like way more complicated.
I heard that many of the like convenience stores that you see around Toronto that say like Bitcoin here, it's like just a sign, and it's like there's never anything that you can
really?
do. It's like the point was to put the sign there to like validate the idea, and that's it. Like,
that'd be interesting. Like you just for boosterism, like passively advertising that it's everywhere. Where's my ATM?
yeah, it will get easier.
I thought it was that you could buy it, but you could, of course, you couldn't use it because it's so unstable. No business could run its books on Bitcoin.
I think in many cases there was just like nothing. It was just like the idea of the convenience store doing it, and maybe that changed over time. But
yeah, well, and I guess there would be unbanked for whatever reason. Like you could be doing remittances, so you could buy Bitcoin and send it back to Panama or something like that, and it would be cheaper than Western Union or that type of service. So I think that's always been a little bit of the convenience store Bitcoin machine is like unbanked folks.
This is a small example, but when Bun's Trading Zone, that's in Toronto,
right,
that connects all the connects anything that anyone wants to end up trading that's outside of money. When they came out with their token, I was actually shocked how many people adopted it and how many of like my friends and my friends' parents were using that token to trade. So in terms of just like those small adoption moments, like you mentioned the little square, yeah, I think it's really easy for someone to just be like, okay, yeah, infrastructure is there, the payment platform's there. Why not?
Yeah, I didn't know that Buns had a coin. That doesn't surprise me. I imagine now I want the Kijiji's next. That's going to just go nuts. Ontario's going to go crazy if there's a Kijiji coin.
I like the sounds of a Kijiji coin. I don't know. I thought that was a weird progression for Buns in general, just because they had the market outside of rather than a token. They had the market first and they brought in the token rather than the token and then trying to build out this trading market.
Can you buy it and then use it within the barter system? I don't know much about Buns.
Yeah, I think, or it's like you can accumulate from your trades or something. I didn't actually use it, but I know they had a coin.
The thing that makes this different, Amex is credit, whereas this is not credit. So I'm like curious how that works in this space. Because similar to what you said around like the boring stuff being the most interesting, like in this space that people call fintech, I just watched a video of some like Australian brothers who started some huge multi-billion-dollar business on the basis of laybys, which I had actually never heard of, period. Apparently it had been big since the 60s, but it's the idea that you can purchase something on credit, and then if you can't pay it back, you have to return the item after like X number of months or something like that. And the thing was that system was like super inefficient. And then these like brothers came along and found out that, hey, if you network it, instead of just like one store burdening the risk of a lay-by, you distribute the risk all across it. You could have this credit system.
Oh, I get it. Right.
And so
like
I'm
make
like,
lots of sales with a more secure system.
Across,
a chain or something.
Same thing as layaway.
Oh, layaway. That's what it is.
Yeah. Layaway. That's like an interesting thing that's like really come back and was kind of gone. And there was like status associations and things like that for a period of time, I think too. That it was almost like a joke. It'd be like buying something on layaway versus like buying it up front or whatever. But now it's becoming totally normalized once again. But the word almost disappeared. It's like almost like a 90s word or something. Yeah. And then it's totally come back. And there's a number of like fintech companies doing that.
Well, that's where I kind of got wondering, like, what is the credit version for crypto? Like, and I think it's a space they don't want to touch because it invokes all kinds of regulations that they are explicitly trying to avoid. As soon as something's in the credit space, it's subject to different kind of regulation. But it just made me wonder, what forms of credit could you have when you have a global distributed network? It's strange what that might mean.
Yeah, you could be making your credit purchases outside not to get all libertarian, but the prying eyes, of regulated fintech versus the other, where like if I buy, I don't know, fertilizer and certain electrical parts on the same credit card purchase, I might get flagged. no such problem if I'm just kind of, it's distributed. I mean, I guess it would be open on a blockchain, but it wouldn't necessarily be monitored at the same way, not going through the same gatekeepers. I don't care about that stuff personally, but.
Greg, for this one, it's mostly kind of like a signpost of like, whoa, this is coming much faster than you might have imagined, or?
I guess it was the deep unsexiness, but the everyday interaction. It was the combination of those two things. I caught myself having wonder in something related to crypto that wasn't entirely new. It was something I knew, but it was just like a better version of something that's kind of like a better version of the wheel or something like that. So for me, it just kind of made me pause because I'm used to this cheerleading 24/7, and it was just I don't know. I almost feel like there's so much excitement for things that are at the edges of the expression or community building or new forms of finance. And I don't know, it felt kind of old, actually. Like it was like an old idea. So I don't know, maybe I just had my head in crypto Twitter too much for too long, that something a little archaic excites me. But
yeah, I really like that as a way of sort of like recognizing these meaningful signals. So when you're like a little bit excited by something that is deeply unsexy, like that maybe means something special. Like, okay, this is definitely relevant if that's the case. I definitely experienced that as well.
It does seem starkly fintechy, where a few people who were excited about crypto didn't get it.
Just like it's like that, like, okay, in Shopify, there's certain plugins that like you can tick boxes and accept payments in certain crypto, and that's it. And then you just can do it. And the person that runs the store doesn't have to know anything about it or care about it. I mean, I guess they're gonna have to figure out what to do on the other end when they get it for cashing it out. But I guess those moments when you just give somebody who kind of doesn't give a shit the option to like turn on some functionality or pipes, and then those are the moments that things kind of increase a bunch, like audiences or things kind of quit being insular or something like that.
Somebody posted this week one of these like memes that was showing like Web 1, 2, and 3, and Web 1 was like username, password. Web 2 was like sign in with Google, Facebook, and whatever other one. Yeah. And then Web 3 was just connect your wallet. So it was kind of like that same kind of one click, like, okay, like you no longer need actually to take your like Google account across these different platforms. You can ostensibly take your wallet and whatever information, data, assets are within that and just carry that from place to place. Which made me think like, oh, it is both banal, but that image made me think like there's something strange about those possibilities. It's not just a congressman buying coffee with crypto. It's like actually something potentially, I don't want to use the word disruptive.
There's something weird about connect your wallet too that's like maybe more constant. Like I don't imagine as much signing in, like your wallet is your browser and so forth, and what that even means. And I'm not positive that what I'm saying even works or holds up, because I guess the reasons you would have like passwords and things in the first place was that like different people are using the same terminals and so on, and like logging off and on. But
it is funny moving the idea of self from the profile to the wallet, though. Methinks there's some implications for making Homebase a wallet.
I think you were the one, Greg, who told me that like, oh, isn't it so strange when like MetaMask makes your browser into a wallet or builds the wallet into your browser, which I was like, oh, I didn't think of it that way, but that is like,
and that was when weird. I just had started using it, and I was just kind of blew my mind that it was a browser that had a wallet. It wasn't a wallet plugin that I put in my browser. Now I'm using Brave, which is like, it's all seamless. It's just that, I guess, it's an interesting addition, an interesting new widget.
It feels like it's like that transition of a wallet just turning into a widget and having more depth in the internet in some way. Rob, when you posted that Hyperbolia link, that like completely flipped my brain in terms of just how you look at the internet as pages and browsers, and that's it. And once you like have like more functionalities, I guess it's just a UX thing again. And I guess that's why people are excited about Web3. That switched my thinking a little bit on, I guess, what people are excited about.
Interesting. Yeah, that's the guy who's created like a game engine basically for generating non-Euclidean geometry environments. A whole different, just like
still a UX
conceiving of space and stuff. Yeah, Which is, I don't know. I always just find the irony of like so much effort and energy and resources are being put into like creating like replicas of the world we already have. Anyway, signal or noise, Jeremy?
I think the thing that sort of resonates with me based on the conversation is like, it seems like something easier for people who don't really know that much about crypto. And in that sense, I feel like it could be signaling like a wider adoption of the technology or something like that. It, like you were saying, generally for people who are starting, they're like, I don't even know what I'm supposed to be doing. And you're like, oh, you just get this app and then you download this thing and you get this key and you go over here. And it's like, obviously the congressman has no time or concern for these kinds of activities. He's got to get his coffee and get back to the Senate or whatever. So yeah, so that's how I sort of see it.
Mm-hmm. Erica, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it signals, just the ease of accepting a new system, I think is a signal. And although paying with crypto is something that we probably all kind of think might eventually happen in an easy and fluid way. But yeah, I guess I just am always shocked when these moments come up that make it really fluid and people are so easily just ready to adopt and use it.
Paulus?
I think the stuff around like the vibe changing or something like that was kind of interesting. Like just that gut reaction of like something's going on here and I don't really know how to make sense of it. But there's something deeply disturbing about how banal all of it seems is kind of interesting. And I felt that way when I found out that Staples Center had been renamed Crypto.com Stadium or something. And as someone who doesn't really participate in pop culture, I think I can like lose track of like what's going on in the mainstream of like American or Canadian culture. And that's one of those moments where I was like, damn, the vibe really changed on what this is. There's so many strange parallels, and there's also so many geopolitical questions that like we don't have time to go into, but that just haunt the space of crypto. And like, actually, it turns out to not be this big geopolitical, whatever, ground swelling thing. It's actually just like another round of business as usual with the same people benefiting and the same, there's nothing changes. It's that somebody wrote an article recently called like post-politics, like our post-political age, where there's just rage and outrage constantly. And yet the most determining fact of our moment is just utter stagnation politically. Just literally nothing changes. Trump came to office, nothing changed. Like this bull in a china shop and literally nothing. It's just the continuation. Policies are the same, et cetera, et cetera. So it's kind of interesting in that way of a sign of like deep stagnation.
Everything.
Not to go too far off. I mean, I think this is related, but like this is what I'm worried about. What's going to happen in Web3? It's just slapping paint a coat on a lot of the same entrepreneurs, and then maybe an allowed permitted new class with new skills, new developers, same venture capital money. And I don't know. I don't know what's being sold, but I feel like everybody's really quick to buy it. And it's not unrelated from the crypto.com arena. You know what I mean? It goes hand in hand with it. I don't know. I'm trying not to be deeply skeptical. Like I'm trying to be optimistic about some of that DAO stuff I kind of dismissed earlier, but I don't know. I kind of have a feeling we're getting sold. I don't know what.
Line goes up.
Yeah. Number goes up. User number goes up.
I do love the example of like the shift that occurs from everyone over the course of COVID with the Staples Center being renamed. We no longer office supplies, no more crypto now.
Yes, that's kind of dematerialized.
We don't go to the office no more.
If anything, that kind of stuff reminds me of like, you guys should watch these videos of like early 90s Russia when they introduced like the stock market and all of these things and the kinds of Ponzi schemes that proliferated and were just rampant across television. It was just like there were these like figures who were just known throughout the entire country, like household figures. That's what it reminds me of. Like when you rename an entire stadium crypto.com, I'm like, ooh, it's like this is a very weird like moment to be celebrating what amounts to like a giant global Ponzi scheme. Not necessarily what all crypto is, but
it runs through it. Seriously. Yeah.
For me, it's a signal because it's a signal for Greg. Like I feel like on its own, I probably would have been like, yeah, it's noise. There's so many examples of these types of things, but the way you sort of have interpreted it, I like it very much. Yeah, it's a signal. Erica, what's your weakest signal?
Donda or Kanye West recently came out with the stem player. And I don't know if you've heard of it, but basically it's a device that allows you to sample and remix music from anywhere. It has like a loop function, speed control functions, but it allows you to isolate parts of the song with lossless audio quality. So it basically looks like a little paw that you can hold in your hand and you work with it. But recently, I guess Kanye West came out and said, he's like, okay, I'm going to release Donda, my next album, on this stem player. And he's like, okay, I'm doing this because I think we need to release artists from the oppression of streaming services. What I find particularly strange in this case is, or a little bit weird, is that these music devices are like this stem device. It's a separate device from our mobile devices. So yeah, I'm just curious to know, we've lost a little bit of that need for separate devices. We rely so heavily on like the universalization of a mobile device and that narrative. And so to have these like little toys or these little stems come out, I think it's kind of fun. But yeah, I guess I'm curious to know what you guys think about STEM in general.
Sounds ship on this. Is it his sounds? Like, is it his samples?
Yeah. So it's my understanding, and I've seen like one demo of it being used, is that you have like the stems from an individual song and you have like several buttons on this little sort of hockey puck shaped thing. And it's basically treated like a drum machine or sampler basically, and you can like start, stop various sounds and essentially like play your own variation of the track. That's my understanding. It may have other functionality than just that. So it's like more than just a music player, but a sort of instrument. But one thing I don't know is the downloading, the way that works. I assume there's like more releases would come out. So that's like kind of exciting that it would be this new, more participative sort of interactive way to enjoy music, like almost like buying sheet music would have been at one point, and actually playing it. You are actually in some way playing it, even though it doesn't necessarily require any skills. And you could also play your minimalist version, play the maximalist version, have your own sort of build up and crescendos within the song. I feel like Kanye's music is so sample based and involves so many the triggering of different samples throughout. Like you can kind of create your own versions of these choruses. So I think it's really exciting. It'll be really awesome for certain music.
Yeah, I think it's a really curious move in music. It reminds me a lot of the toys you would see throughout the 80s and like the early 2000s.
Like those keychains.
Yeah, the keychain ones. So it has a certain level of nostalgia to it as well.
There's even effects on it. I'm looking at the specs: echo, feedback, or gate.
It reminds me of the fidget spinners. Was that during the pandemic or before? Before.
Much before.
Kanye but even would not be pleased with that comment.
Well, even looking at the way Kanye's like holding it, that's what I think of right away. I'm like, I know the design is quite different, but the kind of like stimming activity, like stimming meaning like self-stimulating, like everyone does it, touch your neck, do different things. It's called stimming. Anyways, it looks like he's like stimming when he holds it. That's what I think of.
That's interesting.
An age of anxiety.
Yeah, it looks like there's some tactile satisfaction involved with the
and it's fleshy.
Yeah, kind of bouncing off what you were saying, Rob, because you're playing Kanye tracks on this like small device, it kind of feels like you're taking care of a song rather than listening to it.
That's cool.
And I say that again because of that nostalgia of it looking kind of like a Tamagotchi, but also
very interesting. I like that.
Yeah, I just feel like you play a much more interactive role in whatever music you're playing with, or like you would tend to it in a different way, or it's like it becomes yours. It's very strange. It's
playing the album for someone becomes a totally different thing, right? Like it's like if you're showing someone a song and sitting down with an instrument to show them the song versus playing it. It's like
and stems are different. You're removing the mix, whereas a lot of artistry is. So it's kind of like peeling off the veneer a little bit, and I'm sure they're impeccably engineered each stem. So like when you just hear the horns or something, that can actually sound not so impressive, but it's how they're mixed together. I guess you're giving people the means to do that, but it's a little like come into my process a bit.
Yeah, and it really changes like the artistry of like how you treat each sound, like how many sounds are in each stem potentially. It might not just be one, right?
Was this received with like enthusiasm, curiosity, question, what is this thing?
Yeah, I think people were a little bit shocked about the price point, like at least fans. They were curious to know if like people would spend, I guess, $200 for a thing like this.
Yeah.
But generally, I think like the design heads are pretty excited about it, from what I've read online. Other folks on Twitter are more interested on like I guess how a device like that changes scarcity within music. That there's this idea of scarcity within music. Specifically, Matt Dryhurst is talking about like financialized models of creating music and how this opens up ownership to a track or ownership to a song. So I guess the curiosity there also is like, could it change streaming, experimentation with music, of course, but
yeah, a lot of people are just talking about the price point and not the experience, just because he's saying he's not putting it out on streaming platforms at all.
So this is the only way.
That's the idea. I mean,
or like you buy a record or this.
Yeah, I don't think I don't know about
or not even.
Yeah, it might not be.
Oh, that's okay. Sorry, I get it. So this is where the album lives.
Yeah, this is where the album.
Oh wow,
$200 for a promo experiment.
Yeah.
Like a musician starts from the perspective, I'm not going to put my music on streaming platforms. Then that question mark.
Yeah. It's interesting because that seems to be the statement that's been made, at least in like the messaging that Kanye's put out. Now, whether that's because he thinks it's what resonates with people, because that doesn't necessarily have any like that much to do with the stems aspect or the remixability.
Yeah.
It's just built into the hardware. But the point more just being that like the music industry has actually never been making as much money as it does right now, and never has so little been going to artists. So
I wonder if Kanye West has to sell like 7 of these to make what he'd make off Spotify.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think I know what
that artists of that stature actually do make, when your streams are in the tens of millions, you actually do make money off Spotify, but
he probably does all right. But but I forget what the numbers was, but he's sold tens of thousands, I think, in advance already of this. So he's probably doing very well with it.
I mean, it's not an NFT. That's the thing I can say. 2020
better than an NFT.
About anybody releasing anything. It's intellectual property.
Has anyone seen the FM3 Buddha machine?
I had one.
Yeah.
You had one?
Somewhere.
Yeah.
I had a few, and so you could have them like around, create a sort of like ambient chance operation. Where
everyone just has a Buddha machine.
That's great.
We're like the only. Kanye, it's all right, but
it's kind of that. Like what, 10 years later? 10 years?
Yeah. I mean, and having multiple of them was kind of like having a stem player.
Yeah.
Like, and creating an album that way.
I also recently read that people have been like cracking open iPods again and like reworking the software to like make them more useful or better for 2022. I don't know. So it's just that people are like actually modding old devices and using new software with them as well. Yeah. It's like, I just think people are eager for hardware that isn't your mobile phone.
To play music, Erica, or to like do something different with it, to like I don't know how much computing power it has, but
I think both, but the one that I read is mostly to play music, but that the software just doesn't really make sense for 2022. I don't know. That was what the article was about, that like they were just trying to update the iPod and make it useful for now.
Immediately makes me think of TikTok, just because it's like, well, why wouldn't, like, we're remixing everybody else's stuff. Why don't you just take my stuff too and remix it? And Kanye doesn't need the money, like really. He just wants to kind of be like continuing to progress in some way or form. And like, this is a way to do that. It's almost like his title or something like that, like as a way to say like, no, music industry, you do not own Kanye West. Like, I am my own universe. And this is how I will like show you that, you can only get my album through this like particular source. I feel like there's been other kinds of like marketing stunts like that, but it's like an interesting reflection of maybe like where the greater culture, like beyond producers or people who are very used to sampling technology and these kinds of devices, like would have not seen something as small as this. So I think it is something new from like a technological perspective. And I think it hits like a market that otherwise wouldn't have been all that interested in like sampling or producing. Like this probably does hit a lot of those targets too, but I'll be interested to see other people that come on stream with it who are like releasing their stuff through the stem player, like only.
Yeah.
And whether it's like just like sample pack kind of stuff or whole albums, because that's like you were saying, Greg, like the mix stage is like, it's not the only one, but as far as like produced music like this, like mixing is producing. It's basically the same thing to some degree, you know? So you're ranking like 100 new or whatever, thousands of new Kanye's and like new producers through a device like this.
Yeah, if it could turn into an ecosystem, that'd be pretty cool. Like people could, I guess maybe there's some putting their sounds on or sharing sample packs or whatever. Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, no, I like that idea quite a bit. The idea of putting like sample packs on there for songs and things like that. I'm just really curious to what extent people want it. Like because I don't know that there was a lot of evidence that people were looking for something like this, but maybe I'm wrong about that. Like maybe things just like DJing and the like ways that people have been sort of creating music or participating in music has been growing steadily, and Kanye's actually like kind of reading into something that's been like on its way, that there needed to be some kind of like lower barrier to participating in making your own versions of music or whatever that people were looking to be able to do with new music, and he's creating that.
When you're talking about pickup, I accidentally clicked on the Discord link and there's like 10,000 people on the Discord. Erica was talking about iPods. I just put something to file this alongside is U2's very badly received. We're going to force our album on everybody. Put that on the other side of some, like the other pole of this, where like you can only get the album through the specific device versus you're going to have our album. You need to opt out.
The Jay-Z album too, that came out only on a Samsung.
What
the Wu-Tang
with
thing,
the one copy.
The RZA, one copy. And Nipsey Hussle had an album that I think was like $1,000 each or something like that. Or maybe it was $100 each, something like that. But Jay-Z famously bought like 100 copies of it or something like that. So, Jeremy, signal or noise?
Yeah, I would say signal. It's pretty novel, and I think it's like riding on to some degree. It's like part of this wave of like remix culture that's been widened through like TikTok and that kind of thing.
Greg, signal.
And I'll repeat, in 2022, a new form of distributing intellectual property that's not an NFT. I'm there for it.
Valdes?
I'll play devil advocate and just say noise. I think it's like the design is really cool. Some of the stuff, like the remix stuff, to me feels like not that interesting or something. But that's not what excites me about it. I'm curious, like how he constructs the stems. Like, is there like a different way that he's putting them together or something like that? I don't really know how it works, but is there something that like it fits the form somehow? Like some different way they're doing it, but I don't think it's like a signal of the way he or like at least the entity called STEM is positioning it as like a way to disintermediate labels and get more like revenue to artists and stuff like that. I think like that stuff is like not going to happen on an artist by artist basis. It's like, it's not just artists who've been squeezed. It's everyone, every industry has record profits and less goes to the people working. So it's not going to happen just because somebody figures out a new way to sell like tchotchkes, to people. It's going to happen through other means, I think.
I tend to agree with you that part of it does feel a bit like noise. And yeah, it's interesting though that it almost feels like he's using that message to like obscure his real like intent here or something, because he just really hasn't focused on like, you just haven't heard that many people really talking about the conversation we were having about the experience of enjoying this music as opposed to what we typically do. And that's odd to me. That it's like, it's not just like a player, like it's not just the same as selling a Discman that doesn't open with a CD inside it or whatever. And it's just it's just the only way to listen, or selling vinyl or something like that. It's like, it has a different set of functions. So there's something kind of unique about that. I want to learn a lot more about it and possibly release music on the STEM player. So I'll go signal in that way. Broadcast from later.